Welcome to Dark Tales, where we explore eerie stories and chilling mysteries. It was a quiet night when Julie found herself in her room, scrolling through her phone to unwind after a long day. The clock read 2 a.m., an odd time for anything to happen. But just then, the doorbell rang, startling her. Who would be at the door at this hour? Curiosity got the better of her, and despite the late hour, she decided to check. Julie opened the front door slowly, her heart thumping in the silence of the night. No one was there, but then her eyes fell on a piece of paper lying on the doorstep. She bent down and picked it up, her hands trembling slightly. The note read, "I know where you live. Even if you leave, I will find you. I have known you forever. Soon I will kill you, and I will finally be free." Her mind raced, but Julie shrugged it off. It had to be a prank. There were plenty of teenagers in her neighborhood, after all, always causing trouble. Still, an unsettling feeling lingered as she returned to her room, the note resting heavy in her hand. She convinced herself it was nothing, trying to push it out of her mind. She'd deal with it tomorrow. Morning came abruptly as Julie awoke with a jolt, her heart pounding before she even opened her eyes. Something was wrong. Slowly, she turned her head and froze. On the bed beside her was a dead rat, blood oozing from its neck, staining her sheets. Next to the rat was another note. "I will kill you one day, maybe even tomorrow. I won't fail this time." Panic surged through her. This wasn't a prank. Someone wanted her dead, and they were playing a twisted game. Julie's mind swirled with questions. Who could hate me this much? What did I do? But she tried to calm herself, reassuring her racing thoughts that if things didn't stop, she would go to the police. Later that day, as she searched for answers, Julie remembered an old laptop she had kept from high school. It was ancient, but it might hold some clue. She dug it out, dusted it off, and tried every password she could think of, but none worked. Frustrated, she scoured her room for old journals or school notes, something that might jog her memory. In a forgotten box, Yulia stumbled upon a notebook labeled 1983 to 1986. Do not open. Her heart raced as she flipped through the yellowed pages, the handwriting familiar, yet distant. One entry from August 1984 stood out, chilling her to the bone. "I hate school now. My best friend moved away, and my boyfriend left me for someone else. Even though Tom confessed his love for me, I don't feel the same. My life is a mess." But what came next nearly stopped her heart. "There's this strange teacher at school. I sometimes catch him holding a knife with what looks like blood on it. He always says it's ketchup, but I've seen him threaten a student before. He told me once, 'I will kill you when no one's looking.' I can't shake the feeling that one day he'll do it." The words made her blood run cold. Could this nightmare somehow be connected to her past? Julie knew she had to find out. She decided to return to her old high school, hoping it might lead her to some answers. The next day, Julie packed her phone, a camera, and some notebooks, determined to face whatever truth was waiting for her. But when she arrived, the school was nothing like she remembered. It had fallen into decay, with shattered windows and graffiti covering the walls. Torn photos of students littered the ground, sending a shiver up her spine. Something dark had happened here, and she was about to uncover it. As she climbed over the rusted fence, she spotted something strange on the ground. Written in red spray paint was her name, along with the words, "Sorry you died on September 12th, 1989. We don't miss you, but we had to write this." Julie's heart skipped a beat. Dead? What did they mean? She was alive, wasn't she? Confusion clouded her mind, but she pressed on, entering the abandoned building. Inside, the walls whispered with forgotten secrets. And it wasn't long before Julie stumbled upon a blonde-haired, green-eyed little girl crying in a corner. Concerned, Julie approached her. "What's wrong?" Julie asked softly. The girl sobbed. "My big sister died in this school 5 years ago." Julie's stomach churned. "What was her name?" she asked cautiously. "Marie," the girl replied between sniffles. Julie's heart sank. "Marie Roch," Julie whispered, her voice shaking. The little girl nodded, and that's when everything clicked. Julie had once had a close friend named Marie Roch. Could it be the same person? She pulled out an old photo from her pocket and showed it to the girl. The child's eyes widened in recognition. "How do you know her?" the girl asked, her voice trembling. Julie hesitated, then explained, We were friends once, but everyone thought we were dead." The weight of her words hung in the air. Just then, the little girl hugged her tightly, her small voice breaking the silence. "You loved her, just like I did. Will you be my sister?" Julie's heart ached. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "but no one can replace her. She was unique, and she'll always be in your heart." Before Julie could say more, a loud noise echoed through the halls. They turned just in time to see two masked men approach. Panic surged and everything went black. When Julie awoke, her body was sore, and the smell of smoke filled her nostrils. Flames danced around her, growing closer by the second. She was tied to a chair, struggling to break free as the fire crept nearer. Her hands frantically searched her pockets, hoping for something, anything to help her escape. As she fumbled, she felt a cold hand brush her shoulder. Her blood ran cold. Suddenly, a familiar voice whispered in her ear, "Run! Run as fast as you can!" Julie turned to see Marie standing before her, her ghostly figure calm in the chaos. "How?" Julie croaked, her throat dry from the heat. "I'll guide you," Marie promised. Julie fought against the tight ropes, her fingers searching her pockets for an unknown object. Just as the fire licked at her feet, she felt something sharp, a key. But before she could act, the smoke overwhelmed her and she slipped into unconsciousness once again. When she came to, fresh air filled her lungs, and a young man with dark hair and hazel eyes stood over her. "Miss, wake up, please wake up," he urged. Gasping for breath, Julie barely managed to whisper, I'm okay." A few days later, still recovering, Julie was called to the police station. They informed her that the men who had kidnapped her were notorious criminals, psychopaths who had been evading capture for years. They had already claimed the lives of 11 women and 3 children. Hearing this, Julie realized just how close she had come to becoming their next victim. She had survived, barely, but the nightmares would linger forever. It was 2016, a year that Clara would never forget. She had been planning a weekend getaway with her best friend Emma to celebrate their birthdays. Joining them was Clara's boyfriend Alex. They chose London, a city Clara and Alex had visited before, making it the perfect spot for a short, exciting trip. The plan was simple: explore the city, enjoy the sights, and have a carefree weekend. A few days before their departure, Emma called with great news. Her former neighbors, a couple in their 40s, had recently moved to London and offered to host them for the weekend. This was a huge relief for Clara and Alex, both university students on a tight budget. The idea of staying with a mature couple who Emma knew from childhood felt safe and comfortable. They gladly accepted the offer, looking forward to the fun ahead. The excitement was palpable as they boarded the plane, eager for the weekend to begin. Once in London, they were greeted by one of the neighbors, a man named Oliver. His energy was intense, almost hyperactive, constantly talking and moving around. At first, Clara chalked it up to his exuberance, but something about his erratic behavior unsettled her. When they arrived at the house, they were warmly welcomed by Oliver's partner, David. David seemed calm and kind, a stark contrast to Oliver's jittery demeanor. They all sat down to drink some tea and get to know each other better. But as they sipped, Oliver's strange behavior became even more apparent. He spoke rapidly, dominating the conversation, and at one point offered them candies that, on closer inspection, were clearly pills. Clara politely declined, but Oliver's insistence and mocking attitude made her uneasy. The cheerful start to the weekend began to feel more like a mistake. Things took a darker turn when Oliver and Emma went to the kitchen to chat, leaving Clara and Alex alone to unpack. As they placed their things in the guest room, they suddenly noticed Oliver standing in the doorway, rummaging through their bags. He mumbled under his breath, agitated, before blurting out something chilling. He hated David and had thought about hitting him with a baseball bat when he wasn't looking. Clara's heart sank. This weekend was starting to feel like a ticking time bomb. That night, they went out to dinner, desperate to escape the tension in the house. Clara could barely enjoy the meal, her mind racing for ways to avoid spending the night in that place. Unfortunately, finding another room in London was beyond their budget, and they had no choice but to return to Oliver's house. Emma tried to reassure her, but Clara had a gnawing sense that things would only get worse. Back at the house, the three of them shared a single room, Clara and Alex on the bed, and Emma on a mattress beside them. Exhausted but on edge, they turned off the lights, hoping for some rest. But then they heard the door creak open. Clara's breath caught in her throat. There, standing in the dim light, was Oliver, his eyes wild, clearly high on something. Without a word, he climbed into bed between Clara and Alex. They were frozen, too shocked to move. Oliver pulled out his phone and showed Clara a photo, a bizarrely edited image of Alex's profile picture, where he had been altered to look like a woman. That wasn't the worst of it. Oliver had apparently downloaded several photos of them from their social media accounts, pictures they had never shared with him. After what felt like an eternity, they finally managed to get him out of the room, barricading the door with their luggage, too scared to sleep. The next day, they tried to distract themselves with sightseeing, hoping to put some distance between them and the nightmare they were living. But trouble found them again. In the middle of their day, Emma received a frantic call from her mother. Oliver had called Emma's family, accusing them of being homophobic and threatening to destroy their passports and plane tickets as revenge. He claimed they would have to beg to get their belongings back. Panic gripped them. What should they do? Go to the police or return to the house? With no fluent English speakers among them, they felt helpless. They decided to confront the situation head-on, hoping Oliver had calmed down. When they returned to the house, only David was there. They hurried to check their things, relieved to find their passports untouched. Maybe Oliver had been bluffing. Clara tried to relax and even went to take a shower until she noticed something horrifying. There was a large hole where the bathroom lock should have been, a gaping hole that anyone could easily peer through. The realization sent a wave of nausea through her. She asked Alex to guard the door, but even that didn't prevent Oliver from barging in mid-shower. Clara dressed as quickly as she could, horrified at the thought of him lurking so close. That night, they locked themselves in their room again, stacking their bags against the door for protection. They didn't sleep, waiting for morning when they could finally escape. When it was time to leave, Oliver followed them to the bus stop, muttering about his medications and strange voices telling him to watch out for them. They boarded the bus in silence, hearts pounding as relief washed over them. It was over, or so they thought. Back home, the nightmare continued. Oliver began harassing them on social media, sending disturbing messages. Then came the final, grotesque twist. He offered to send them back their missing underwear if they gave him their address. They blocked him immediately, cutting off all contact, praying they would never have to see or hear from him again. It was a weekend they had hoped would be full of joy and celebration, but it turned into a chilling reminder that some doors should never be opened. "13 years ago, Remy experienced something he still can't explain. A night that lingers in his memory like a splinter he can't remove. He's not one to believe in the supernatural. He's always been a skeptic. But what happened that night in December 2009 in a quiet village in Corsica defies all rational thought. It was the dead of winter, and the town of Moriani, where Remy lived with his mother for a year, was nearly abandoned. Few people wandered the streets, and Remy had only a small circle of local friends to pass the time. One evening, Mike, the oldest and boldest of the group, suggested they do something out of the ordinary. Visit an abandoned house in the village of San Nicolau, a short drive up the mountain. Joining them were Mathieu, who shared Mike's superstitious nature, and Alexis, who, like Remy, didn't buy into ghost stories. Yet despite his doubts, an unease settled in Remy's chest as they piled into Mike's car and headed into the night. The drive was supposed to be fun, just some friends, music, and laughter. But as they passed a decrepit cemetery on the way into San Nicolau, something shifted. A sense of foreboding filled the car, like the air had thickened. The moment the music cut off and they stepped out into the cold, a palpable tension wrapped around them. Remy tried to shake it off, but his instincts were screaming at him to be cautious. As soon as they got out of the car, Remy and Mathieu both heard it, a strange noise coming from the house. They exchanged uneasy glances, but a quick investigation revealed nothing more than a white horse standing in a nearby garden, calmly chewing grass. Its presence was oddly comforting, yet unnerving at the same time. They circled the house looking for a way in. The structure was strange, 3 floors, with the uppermost level at street level and 2 lower ones plunging into the earth below. A rusted metal staircase on one side led down to the middle floor, while an old stone staircase descended to the lowest. They peered through the windows, but it was too dark to see inside. The air was heavy with an unfamiliar smell, and wisps of smoke seemed to rise from within, though the house had clearly been abandoned for years. Intrigued, Remy decided to explore further. He descended the metal staircase to the lower floors, only to find something bizarre: smoldering embers glowing faintly in the dark. That unsettling smell was stronger here. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Someone had been here recently. He bolted back up the stairs, his mind racing, only to witness something even stranger. The smoke he had seen was now inexplicably rising from the lowest floor, disappearing and reappearing on the highest level. There was no logic to it, no reason for it to happen. It defied everything he knew. Before he could process it, the others called out to him from the other side of the house. They had found a door, old and wooden, leading into the lowest floor. Mike and Alexis wanted to open it, but Remy warned them to be careful. What if the house wasn't as abandoned as they thought? Ignoring his caution, the two forced the door open and fell into a room that made their blood run cold. The room was covered in dried blood, and the smell hit them like a wall. Without a second thought, they bolted for the car, adrenaline-fueled panic overtaking them. Inside the car, they tried to rationalize what they had seen, calming themselves with the idea that maybe the blood came from a hunter, perhaps someone who used the house to butcher animals. But deep down, none of them believed it. And still, Mike, stubborn and fearless, insisted on going back. Reluctantly, Remy followed. Back at the door, they shone a flashlight into the room. This time, the light revealed a horrifying sight: a skinned animal lying on a table, its lifeless eyes gleaming in the beam of the flashlight. The sight turned Remy's stomach, and he couldn't stay there a second longer. He rushed back to the car, and the others followed, too disturbed to argue. But the horror wasn't over yet. As they drove back, the atmosphere in the car was tense, silent. When they passed the cemetery again, Remy noticed something that made his heart race. The small wooden shack by the graveyard, which had been closed before, was now wide open. He couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was following them. Minutes later, they were forced to stop. A massive tree had fallen across the road, blocking their path. They got out to inspect the damage, only to realize something terrifying. The tree hadn't fallen naturally. It had been deliberately cut, the clean, smooth edges revealing a fresh wound. Whoever had done this was nearby, watching them. Mike panicked, bolted from the car, running down the dark road. Mathieu chased after him, leaving Remy and Alexis alone. They cautiously approached the car, checking it for any signs of tampering, but found nothing. Locking themselves inside, they waited for their friends to return. When Mike finally did, he was hysterical, claiming he had seen a white figure pass right in front of him. The firefighters arrived soon after, pushing the tree into the ravine and hearing the group's bizarre tale. As they drove back to town, shaken but relieved, a strange sensation crept over them. Despite being in familiar surroundings, nothing felt right. The streets, the buildings, even the air seemed different, as if they had crossed into another version of their town. The thin mist that shrouded everything added to the eerie, dreamlike quality of the night. No news reports of strange events ever surfaced, and no one was ever found to explain the cut tree or the blood-soaked room. For Remy, the memory of that night remains, a chilling mystery he still can't explain. The night where reality twisted and left him questioning what is real and what lies just beyond our understanding. Thanks for joining me today on Dark Tales. If you're as intrigued by this mystery as I am, hit that like button and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more dark stories from the shadows. And remember, not everything that lurks in the woods can be explained. Stay curious. Stay safe.